You may think you can go to the store for that six-pack, but you are endangering other people. And it's frustrating because our state and county plows have been out there nonstop, giving up time and putting themselves in danger, driving through blinding snowstorms to clear the roads. They clear them, and now all of a sudden, because someone wanted to go out to the store, or just run and visit a friend, or take pictures of the snow, they are now stranded, and we have to expand our emergency operations, our rescue, to them as well. So that is why we're pleading with people to please stay home for the duration of this event. We can see the end in sight. It's just not today, and tomorrow we'll give you updates on how that looks. So the weather forecast is, it's coming back, and not with the severity, but it's also going to be rather intense later this evening. As I mentioned, the search and rescue has resulted in a lot of recoveries. Tragically, there has been a loss of life. The numbers continue to increase. We have confirmed now 12 storm-related deaths, and unfortunately, we know that there'll be more numbers that'll be being unveiled as soon as they're actually confirmed. But there is substantial, significant, and devastating loss of life as a result of this winter storm. There are people also in their homes, freezing cold for the last 56 hours. Some of them have been without power. This is nothing to do with the resources. We have been in communication with the CEOs of the two major utilities, NYSEC and NYSEC and National Grid. They have told us that this is the largest mobilization of utility crews in the history of the state, or at least in recent memory. So it is not the resource. The people are here. We pre-positioned, as a state, over 7,000 individuals to be here to put the power back on. But what we're experiencing is a mobility and access challenge. The roads are not clear enough, and when they're cleared, the snow drifts continue to come in. When they finally do get to these substations, they find that they've been compromised, they've been damaged, the ice has done significant damage that now needs to be repaired. Or the other situation where you need to have people up on the lines. You always have that image of the linemen and linewomen going up there. You can imagine when there's blizzard force winds, 35 miles an hour sustained, and just yesterday it was sustained at 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. That is a real challenge. It is not safe for them to be able to go up there. And that's going to continue through the night. That being said, we do have 94.5% of Erie County residents have their power on. That is a good thing. And about 87% of Buffalonians in the city now have their power restored. But if you're one of the people without the power and you've got little kids at home, something I experienced as a mother growing up here, it's scary. And it's frustrating, and I know people are at wit's end, especially for families who've been trapped together on a holiday and thought they were going to see other loved ones. I know how hard this is, but Western New Yorkers are tough. We know how to deal with this. We will get through this together. And we also, as I mentioned, we need you to stay home for the next 24 hours at least, and we'll be giving updates on when people can leave. We've also been checking in on our hospitals. That is one of the reasons we deployed the National Guard. And our National Guard, we are having conversations about deploying the National Guard even before the storm hit. These were conversations on Wednesday and Thursday. The storm hit Chautauqua County at 7 a.m. on Friday, 10 a.m. and here in Erie County. And so we've been talking about that, getting them pre-positioned. We did run into logistical challenges. We had scores of people ready to come, and they get trapped in snow themselves. But they're on the ground. We have 200 now, another 200 tomorrow. They'll be coming in through the night, and they were able to access the Armory in Buffalo, which is where most of the equipment is. That was snowed in for a considerable amount of time as well. So the National Guard is here. Lastly, I'll say I've been in contact with the White House. Just spoke in the last hour with Ron Klain, the Chief of Staff to President Biden. He has assured me that within a very short time of them receiving our request for a disaster declaration, it will be granted. And that is good news for us to be able to start covering the cost of this epic, once-in-a-lifetime storm that we're now having to deal with. So that is an update from the White House. The President is very concerned about this. He said, whatever you need from the White House, we will be there for you, and I'm grateful to President Biden for that support as well. With that, I'll turn it over to the county executive for more details, and then we'll hear from Steve Nigrelli, who is the New York State Superintendent of State Police, but he's also a local resident, so he knows how to deal with the storms. I'm also fortunate to be joined by other professionals on my team. I was embedded with them intensely for 4 or 5 days just 5 weeks ago when we dealt with the historic amount of snow that fell in western New York, setting a record for the state, the most snow in a 24-hour period. That is Commissioner of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, Jackie Bray, and our DOT Commissioner, Marie-Therese Dominguez, and they've joined me here from Albany as well. With that, County Executive, look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Governor. On behalf of the people of Erie County, one of whom is you, I want to thank you for the resources that you sent into our region even before the storm started. It's not just the National Guard that was called up by the governor. We have resources from New York State Office of Emergency Management, New York State Fire, New York State Police, New York State DEC Police, New York State Park Police, of course, the additional troops that were brought in from the DOT. It was not a lack of having resources available. It was a storm that unfortunately prevented us from doing anything. As I noted earlier, in the first time in the history of the Buffalo Fire Department, the Buffalo Fire historian said they could not respond to calls because it was so bad. For those of you who don't understand what it was like, think about looking just a few feet in front of you at a sheet of white for more than 24 hours in a row. That's what it was like outside in the worst conditions. It was continual blizzard and whiteouts such that no one could see where they were going. Nobody had any idea what was happening unless you were just happened to be in the one location. The conditions are still very rough across the county, and unfortunately, as we note, and as the governor noted, we are expecting additional snow to come back into the city of Buffalo metro region in the next 24 hours. There is the weather forecast, which was updated to us by the National Weather Service as of 3 o'clock, noted that there will be about 2 inches of snow that'll fall by 7 p.m. tomorrow in the city of Buffalo, but another 3 to 4 by Tuesday at 7 a.m. And in some of the lower lying areas in the metro region, the cities of Lackawanna, Hamburg, Evans, Orchard Park, they may actually see another foot of snow as a result of this ban, which is not dropping snow at tremendous rates, but it is just moving very slowly. And unfortunately, it is adding to the problems that we're dealing with, including the gusting winds are expected to continue, at least 35 miles per hour gusty winds, which of course creates blizzard-like conditions. The official blizzard is over with, but that doesn't mean it is okay out there. It is still a life-threatening lake effect storm where the snow is falling, and in the areas that had the significant snow, even if the snow's not falling, you still see blizzard conditions just because of the blowing snow. And so we want people to understand that it is very dangerous. That's why we're asking people to stay off the roads. The driving ban in Erie County will continue until 7 a.m. tomorrow, at which time we will revisit it for certain communities in the county. We do not expect to be lifting the driving ban tomorrow for the city of Buffalo and other areas that were adversely affected. We may be able to lift the driving ban tomorrow for some of our southern communities, but we will revisit that in the morning. But as of now, the driving ban is still going to be in effect in Erie County until 7 a.m. The county is assisting National Grid and NYSEG with regards to restoration efforts. As the governor noted, there has been tremendous efforts that have been made today, and thousands have been restored with power, but we know there's still approximately 15,000 customers in the city of Buffalo of National Grid who do not have power. I don't want to say this, but unfortunately, based on the information we have from National Grid, restoration may not occur until Tuesday for many of those people. As I noted earlier today, substations froze. They were snowed under. We had a report that one substation had an 18-foot drift onto it, and when they got in, the substation was frozen. They still don't even know to the extent the damage that occurred in the substation. They were able to restore power for about 5,000 city residents today, and I want to thank all the men and women of National Grid and NYSEG who've been working in horrible conditions to get us in a situation where we are today. And it doesn't really make you feel any better if you don't have power at your house, and it's still possible some people will not have power restored until Tuesday. But I do want to thank our friends with National Grid and NYSEG for all the work that they're doing. Emergency services, we've been assisting with a lot, including helping AMR, the ambulance provider for a vast majority of this area, recover ambulances that had to be abandoned. 11 ambulances were dug out today and recovered for AMR where they could be put back in service. But it still is difficult in many of the streets in the city of Buffalo, especially to traverse. We do believe that in the towns of Amherst, Tonawanda, Clarence, that there is at least on the major routes one lane, 2 lanes on some of them. But when you're hearing about Transit Road having 1 lane, it is one serpentine lane over a highway that generally has 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south, and a turning lane. And it's basically like a snake going along. Same was reported to me earlier today by Supervisor Patrick Casilio of Clarence, that they had 1 lane on Main Street and 1 lane on Sheridan. This is not for the average person to drive, this is for emergency personnel to get through the community. And then, of course, neighborhoods have not been touched. We understand that. The problem is you can't push the snow. It is too thick, it is too heavy. We have drifts of 7 or 8 feet on some streets, and we have to come in with high lifts. I can actually hear a high lift working here right now. That's the only way you can clean the snow, is through these high lifts. And then often you can't even push the snow with the high lift. You have to lift it up and put it in a dump truck, which is what is going on. So it's going to take some time for recovery in the hardest hit communities. As the governor noted, unfortunately, we have 12 deaths that have been confirmed by the Erie County Department of Health Medical Examiner Office. I can specifically note that 6 were in the city of Buffalo, 3 were in the town of Amherst, of which 1 of them was in the village of Amherst, located in the town. 3 were in the town of Cheektowaga, of which 1 of them was in the village of Depew in the town of Cheektowaga. The youngest individual was age 26. The oldest individual was age 93. And unfortunately, we do believe, based on reports we're getting from the field, we are going to get a number, hopefully not a significant number, but a number of additionally confirmed deaths in the next 6 hours because of bodies that have been found but have not yet been transported to hospital for identification and confirmation of death. So to all who've lost a loved one, and some of those folks may not even know it yet, just, you have our deepest condolences. This has just been a horrible, the worst type of storm you can imagine. And you have my deepest condolences on behalf of the people of Erie County for the loss of a loved one on Christmas Day. This is a storm we will never forget. It is a storm for the record books, but it doesn't make that anyone feel better if they've lost a loved one as a result of this storm. So please hug your family, give them a kiss, and know that we're not out of the woods yet. We still have more work to do. And we really, really need people to stay off the street, because it is impeding our efforts, not just to clear roads, but to do emergency response. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Stephen Negrelli of the New York State Police to talk more about that.
Thank you, Governor and County Executive. I stand before you humbled that I get to represent the first responders today, the men and women who for the last several days have been out working through this blizzard-like conditions. Many who have been on duty, sleeping on their off time at stations and firehouses and salt barns. Many who haven't gone home or seen their loved ones since Friday morning. But you've asked them, it may say December 25th on their calendar, but today's a work day. We say that with pride, because we are here to serve the community, and that's what we are. Because I'll ask you this rhetorically, if not us, then who would be on patrol? Who would be responding to these recoveries? Who would be serving the community? Now it takes a partnership, a true team effort from every aspect of state government, from our National Guard and our partners in Office of Emergency Management and State Fire, who've been really the underdog here, the unsung hero. State Fire, unbelievable recoveries. They've been transporting people in need of medical emergencies throughout the county. So for our friends in State Fire, job well done. To our partnerships in Buffalo Police and Buffalo Fire, we can't go this alone. But truly, it's one team. But I will caution the public, as the governor and the county executive said, some of these roads may just start becoming passable with 1 lane. But the roadways are peppered with abandoned vehicles and tractor trailers and even plows. So while we are out there working with our plow service and tow, we are trying to remove those vehicles from the roadway. I know people want to see their loved one on this holiday, and I'm sure you're getting a little bit of a cabin fever. Please, you're only going to inhibit our efforts. Every step forward in clearing the roadways, you, by going on a road, slowing progress, getting stuck, is just delaying our ability to reopen Western New York. So I know we call it the city of good neighbors, and there's a lot of things to be proud of. I'm proud of you, those who choose to stay at home. Be with your family, be safe. On behalf of everybody in the first responder community, the hundreds and hundreds have been here in Western New York. It's our honor to serve you. but please serve us by staying at home. If not, I've just directed the New York State Troopers to begin traffic enforcement for people who choose not to stay off the roadways. This is a driving ban. If you're out on the roadway, you will be ticketed. We choose on this Christmas not to ticket people. We choose and wish that you'd stay home. So please, stay home. Be a good neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions. We have, we're going to open it up to questions. We're going to start out with a couple for the governor, and I know she has to leave then. We have Mark Summer or Aaron Bessaker from the Buffalo News. Aaron, I think your hand is up, so you need to unmute.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Yep,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. Two things. We've heard that there is looting going on. Can you confirm that it's happening and where, and what, if anything, is being done about it, and what's your reaction to it? And secondly, given the seriousness of the weather forecast for the storm, you pre-positioned workers, utility workers, but why wasn't the National Guard already staged and ready to go here?
Well, the National Guard, we started making plans Thursday before the weather came. The National Guard started arriving Friday afternoon. The storm didn't hit Buffalo until 10 o'clock. What the National Guard does is help transport people once the conditions have gotten really declined, getting doctors and nurses to hospitals, getting patients to where they need to go, helping with the search and rescue. And very early in a storm, those purposes are not required to be met. So we had the National Guard on the ground the very first day of the storm, which is quite extraordinary. We expedited the time for them to come, but the challenge is, despite our call down of the National Guard, they have to travel on the same roads under the same conditions as our snow plows that ended up going into ditches and our utility vehicles that couldn't get anywhere. We don't have any magic way to get the National Guard here any faster. We had a whole group of them coming down for Niagara Falls who got stranded in the storm on Friday. So that is the logistical challenge we had. It was always the desire to have them positioned here, ready to go. But as conditions deteriorated in the afternoon on Friday, it became logistically challenging. They also have the majority of their resources at the Buffalo Armory, the armory on the west side of Buffalo that was really under siege as well. So the challenge of getting them to get the vehicles that they use became quite serious. So we've kept increasing the numbers, bringing them in from all over the state. We brought them in from Syracuse, Rochester, Utica, Binghamton. But again, they travel on those same roads that are being jammed up with people who continue to drive during the bans. The tractor trailers that have jackknifed on our roads, and that would be the challenge that we encountered. We'll have 400 tomorrow, over 200 today, and it continue to increase the numbers on an as-needed basis.
How about the looting?
Superintendent?
Good evening, Aaron. We have had 2 confirmed reports of looting incidents where law enforcement has been dispatched and we responded. Those are still under investigation as we speak. Those are isolated incidents. It's not reflective of the great community we have here in Western New York, and I'm sure that they'll be limited to those 2 incidents, or at least that's our hope. Thank you.
And if I may respond to the portion of the question with regards to the putting of equipment and resources. As I said earlier today in my press conference, we could have had 1,000 more pieces of equipment, and there's not a thing we could have done because we had to take them off the road for hours and hours and hours on end. We have a lot of equipment. There are really thousands, truthfully, between all of the towns, the cities, the villages, the county, the state, the resources at our disposal right now. The problem was during the highest point of the storm, there were hours, 12-hour period where we couldn't have anybody on the roads. We had to stop emergency service availability. We were trying to send people out, but for those of you who are not from this area, and there's some members of the media from the New York City market, 2/3 of the equipment that we sent out got stuck, and we had to send rescue missions to rescue the rescuers. It's as simple as that. And so this is a historic storm. I remember the blizzard of '77. I was 9 years old back then. It seemed pretty fun for me back then, but then you hear afterwards about the number of people who died and the circumstances that occurred. And this is unfortunately a very similar storm, and I'm hoping we don't have as many deaths as the blizzard of '77, but there was a period there where nothing could be done because of how bad the conditions were. Why don't we go to, his next hand was up, was Ed Dranch from WKBW TV locally. Ed?
Governor, I just want to follow up because it seems to me that the issue of pre-positioning the National Guard members is highly discussed now on Twitter, on Facebook. There are a lot of people who are weighing in here, including Melissa DeRosa, who was part of the former governor's cabinet, who said earlier today on Twitter that this is why we pre-position the National Guard. So why wasn't the National Guard, obviously you had been discussing this for days, brought in before the storm started? Can you walk us through that process?
Absolutely.
And why they weren't here?
Absolutely, and it's great to be able to armchair quarterback an historic storm, the likes of which no previous governors ever had to deal with. So we'll happily say that as an observation. But let me just get to the facts. The National Guard was talked about in advance, but the most important thing we needed to do when you have a snowstorm coming is to know that you can get the snow off the roads, because the National Guard has to travel on those roads. We brought in an army of snow removal vehicles, high lifts, the plow drivers. We had hundreds of people pre-positioned, knowing that when the snow flies, that they'd be able to immediately start removing snow. Now, what was not foreseen, and again, no one is recognizing this if they're giving a fair assessment of what happened, it was a blinding snowstorm. I could have had 5,000 people all ready to come in, but it was challenging because once the snow starts, you can't even see. So we had people ready to be deployed. The National Guard takes a little bit of time to call up. They don't just show up when you click your fingers. But also we knew that we had to get the plows and the plow drivers in first so the roads could get cleared, and that was our first priority. The National Guard comes in to help when local governments aren't able to accomplish their jobs. You don't bring them in every minute. You bring them in to support the local recovery efforts, the medical search and rescue. And all those circumstances evolved after a little bit more time, and as they started, our people were on the ground. So the timing worked out for us. We'll have exactly the number of people we need throughout this process. We pre-position people, but again, it is impossible to get through these roads. Even if you're a National Guard member, you're as limited as everybody else is on those same roads, and that is the challenge that I think everybody looking at this objectively is going to understand.
And Ed, if I can actually respond to that comment from Melissa DeRosa, she might have forgotten, but I was the county executive back in 2014 during the superstorm that hit back then. And I remember making the specific request to Governor Andrew Cuomo to get the National Guard here. They were not pre-positioned beforehand. They did not get here until the second or third day of the storm. The actual National Guard this time got here sooner. And I thank the governor for doing that. So to Ms. DeRosa, that's a little revisionist history because I remember it clearly, because this is exactly where I was, and this is exactly where Governor Andrew Cuomo came during the storm. The next person.
Can I just follow up with you really quick too, Mark? I'm just wondering, knowing the response here in terms of what equipment has had to be used, in addition to the call for volunteers, especially in the city of Buffalo with snowmobilers, is there any future assessment that might be made to, buy or have Erie County warehouse some of that equipment to use in the future?
Well, it's in some ways it's not always a lack of equipment. It's the ability to get it out to where it needs to be. And that's exactly what happened in the storm. We have snowmobiles. We have all-terrain track vehicles. We did, in the initial report from the Weather Service, it was all county snow. It was a snow that was predicted for the entire county. And it did hit the entire county, but in different waves. So even in the situation where we had the snowmobiles out, we had to bring the snowmobiles in when it was too dangerous for the snowmobilers to go anywhere. And I want to remind that you can have as many pieces of equipment as you want, but if you don't have the ability to know where you're going and see where you're going and not drive into a truck and a plow and not drive into a snowbank, which is what happened to hundreds and hundreds of people, it really doesn't matter how many pieces of equipment you have. We have a substantial supply of equipment, and we have the resources, we have the manpower, but when you have to bring in all that manpower because it's too dangerous for them to be on the road, it really limits our ability to respond. And I have to give a big shout out to all the first responders and law enforcement and others who were going out at the height of the storm and putting their lives on the line. As Chief Brizzolaro of the Erie County Sheriff's Office noted last night, they have a special tactical rescue team that trains in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains during the winter on snow rescue efforts. And at one point yesterday, in the overnight hours from the night before and yesterday morning, that rescue team was rescuing rescuers because the people that went out, including EMTs or driving ambulances and the like, they got stuck and they couldn't, their lives were at risk. So it was so horrible, and I think you know it, Ed, because I saw you commented in your live, or the video you did walking into the station yesterday about how horrible it was, that while people can question, especially those that weren't in the storm, why more couldn't have been done in that situation, it was a situation that everything that could be done was done until the point we had to bring people in because their lives were at risk. We have time for a couple more questions. One more. The one question we have is Kyle. The other one who was early up was Kyle Mazza. He was one of the earliest ones. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Governor. How are you? I
Good,
hope you're well during this storm. I know you guys are doing everything you can. So the one question that I had is, you mentioned that you were in close coordination and in close touch with President Biden and the White House. Have you also spoken with the Vice President's team and more members of the staff from the White House or Congress, Senator Chuck Schumer? Do you have any sense of if they're going to do more aid to the storm? Do you think President Biden, once this emergency situation subsides, do you think that President Biden should come to Buffalo, come to the state of New York, and see the damage and talk with families? What do you think the White House needs to do in these next steps going forward, in your perspective?
No, absolutely. We've been in contact. I spoke with Senator Gillibrand. I spoke with Majority Leader Chuck Schumer again earlier today. I spoke with Ron Klain, the Chief of Staff to the White House, and FEMA has been giving them literally minute-to-minute news on what's going on. So when I started giving a briefing to them, they knew everything that we know because they're so engaged in real time. So the message from the Chief of Staff was, he said, as soon as you request a declaration, an emergency declaration, a declaration of disaster, that'll lead to reimbursement of our costs. Again, there's a certain threshold that has to be met. He says we will grant it within 24 hours. And that may sound miraculous, except 5 weeks ago, when we dealt with an historic record amount of snowfall in the entire state of New York in 24 hours in Buffalo, November 18th, they responded with such speed, people's jaws dropped. So they know how important it is for localities and for states to get the resources, all the support we need. So the answer was, the last thing I left with the White House was, whatever you need, they said, you call us. So I have no doubt that the Biden administration will be very responsive. President Biden knows he's always welcome here. He was here so many times. He was here during the Buffalo massacre, came personally with the Vice President and the First Lady. So he knows where we are, but this would not be a safe time to travel. It took me an enormous amount of time to get here. This city is still under siege. My own home has been without power for a couple of days and flooding with broken pipes, frozen pipes. So there's a lot of bad things going on right here. The president should stay where he is right now. He can come visit us anytime, but in the middle of a blizzard is not a good time. But the support from them has been extraordinary.
Are you pressuring the power companies to do more, Governor? You did mention the power outages and multiple customers are without power. So when it's safe, how is the estimate going to be to get these customers back up and running?
You know, I just got off the phone, the county executive and I make the same phone calls to the same CEOs of two of the big utilities. Again, at our request, they pre-positioned, not the usual 5,000, which is incredible in its own right. They ramped it up to 7,000 utility workers and all the trucks they would ever need for any scale storm. They were here in advance of the storm. In fact, there's other states that are waiting for assistance because everything is focused here in Western New York, and that has been confirmed. And I appreciate their patience. So it's not a matter of resources, the body or the equipment. It is mobility and access. And I was told that under normal circumstances, and they have restored power to 300,000 people, 94.5% of Erie County residents have their power. 87% of Buffalo residents have their power. But if you're in that percentage that don't, it doesn't matter. You're still suffering, and they know this. So I'm not one who goes out of my way to always defend utility companies, because when they do something wrong or not fast enough, they'll hear about it from me. But in this case, they have said, because they, as the county executive described you in one scenario, those substations where a lot of the power was shut down, cut off from people, they're either inaccessible, so we made a priority to try and get those opened up, the access to them, and you hit a wall of 18 feet of snow to block you from getting into it, open it up, and it is frozen, and there's damage to everything in there, that's a real challenge. So you can have thousands of people standing on the outside, and I give them credit. They couldn't access because of the snow, and they actually, there's a group that walked 30 minutes in below zero wind chills, walked there with their equipment, trying to break in to get them out. So I do give them credit. We're watching it closely. They know this is an urgent matter. It's a matter of life and death for our residents who can no longer be much longer in this level of cold. But we're reaching out to everybody. That's another thing I have the National Guard doing is wellness checks, working to make sure that we're working with local governments and social services agencies to check on people who have been in freezing temperatures for the last few days. So it will abate soon. The vast majority of people have their power restored. But again, it all ties into people staying off the streets, so these utility crews don't have any barriers or any new stranded vehicles that'll block their access to be able to do exactly what they want to do, what we want them to do, and that is to get the power back on. All
Thank
right.
you, Governor.
I've got to continue my tours. All right, thank you,
Merry
everybody.
Christmas,
Thank you.
Governor.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you. I will stay on to answer any questions for media with regards to response, if they're, just wait for, Superintendent, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner, Commissioner. Tim Wenger, WBEN.
Hey, Mark, thank you. I just want to go back to the snowmobile thing again. I know a lot's been asked about it, but, and I completely understand that during zero visibility, it doesn't matter whether you have a snowmobile or a tank, you can't operate it. But this morning, as we were taking call after call from people that were still stuck in vehicles, in some cases desperate, how many snowmobiles are we talking about that were out and about that were, trying to get to these people?
I can't give you the exact answer. We did contact the Western New York Snowmobile Association yesterday. Actually, there were contact going back and forth, and there was assistance. I know dozens were on the road, but I can't give you the exact amount. The problem is we're talking about a large-scale storm that affected Buffalo, it affected Amherst, Tonawanda, Clarence, then it went up to Niagara County. And it's a perfect example of, even when we have such a big community, 10 dozen, 120 of them is a lot of snowmobiles, but it still isn't enough to perform the rescues that were needed. So I can't give you the exact answer, but I do know that early on the snowmobiles were contacted. And then the other thing too is our own snowmobilers that are based here out of the Emergency Services Division went out on rescue calls and attempts, and they still had to come back in because the conditions were so bad. I had somebody say, why don't they use Google phones? Well, when you're in the middle of a blinding snowstorm trying to drive a snowmobile, you can't sit there and hold your phone in front of you to see exactly where the street is. And that was part of the problems. If they had to make a turn, they couldn't even see where the street was. So I would just say that I wish wishes are something. I wish we didn't have to face a storm as horrible as we did, but we did. And I just want to thank every one of the first responders that was out putting their lives on the line in these just terrible situations to help people. And we know, unfortunately, 12 people have died, and we're expecting more announcements, and that's just terrible. It's just horrible.
Is there a way, Mark, in the future to get a quicker deployment of the National Guard? This morning we asked why the National Guard wasn't helping some of these people. Again, this is after the visibility issues were gone, and we were told that the National Guard didn't deploy on the ground in Buffalo until this morning, which is kind of contradicts what the governor
No,
said.
that is not the case. But National Guard went to yesterday and was immediately assigned life-saving operations associated with bringing people to Kenmore Mercy Hospital, which is of course the hospital for North Buffalo as well as Riverside and Tonawanda at Kenmore. So then, because the National Guard was coming in from Niagara Falls, and they were driving through whiteout conditions, it made sense to send them to the closest location that needed immediate service. It did not, we originally had them planned to come here to the Emergency Operations Center and then deploy them out from here, but it made no sense to do that because it would have taken them an extra 2 hours just to go from Tonawanda to the Emergency Operations Center during the height of the storm. So the Guard was out. We didn't get as many Guard troops initially as more were coming in. I just earlier today talked to a group of Guards that came from Oneonta, and that's a long drive. And they were here doing life-saving rescues, delivering people medication, as well as taking them to dialysis. The Guard was out earlier, it's just the height of the storm was such that we could not get them into the worst portion of it. One final question with the hand raised is Victoria Holliker, and then that'll be it.
Hey, yeah, I was just wondering if we could get any clarification on the travel bans and any tickets. Have tickets been given out? Do you have any idea how many? And what's happening to those cars that have been stranded on the roads?
Well, I'll start with what's handed with the cars. They've been taken whatever community they're in to towing locations in north, when I say north, I should say Amherst, Clarence, and parts of Tonawanda. We've been taking vehicles that have been towed through tow operators hired by the county to Erie Community College North Campus. The town of Cheektowaga has been towing individuals to the old Apple Tree Mall. The city of Buffalo, I'm not exactly certain where the city is towing the cars. I can tell you there are hundreds of cars still on the streets in the city of Buffalo. And they will have to be towed for those streets to be cleaned. The National Guard, as New York State Police Superintendent Stephen Negrelli noted, he's now authorized his troopers to ticket. Truthfully, police were not involved in ticketing operations. They were involved in life-saving operations for the first 2 days of this. I saw a lot of police officers, sheriff's deputies, and others walk into this place looking like they had just gone through a war and just happy to be inside. So their primary obligation was life-saving. It wasn't ticketing. Everyone, as I said before, you are violating an emergency order, which is a Class B misdemeanor, so you don't want to get ticketed. That's a pretty high potential fine, and actually it's, because it's a misdemeanor, it's potential jail time. I would just remind everybody, as Superintendent Negrelli said, we're known as the city of good neighbors. That means you have to be a good neighbor to the other people. You going out on the road could prevent, because you get in an accident or you get stuck, which cars are still getting stuck out there. We're still getting reports of cars going out and getting stuck. And when you get stuck, that may prevent an emergency service vehicle from getting through to somebody who's having a heart attack. So please stay home. The driving ban is still in effect for the entire county until 7 a.m. We will revisit it for some of the communities, and we will announce if there's changes for some of those communities by 6 a.m. But as of now, the driving ban is still in effect for the entire county. Thanks to all media. If you have any further, that's all I have time for. If we have any more questions, I would ask that you forward it to peter.anderson, ANDERSON, @erie.gov, my press secretary, and we will get back with you. I see there's a couple questions in the chat. We will try to send you information on those. Please send the email to peter.anderson @erie.gov. Thank you. And be safe and well to all, and Merry Christmas.